Omar is a UC Berkeley student, and Evelyn is a George Washington alum. They both are on the streets of Washington, D.C., in front of the White House, among a huge group of people that has formed in celebration for President elect Joe Biden's win in the presidential election. Going now to Omar and Evelyn on the screen. Omar, Evelyn, can you tell us what's going on out there? Can we see a little bit of the action?
But we are seeing a lot of celebration. A lot of people is coming out of the streets. Definitely, there is a lot of hope and a lot of joy for the results. A few days ago, there was a lot of uncertainty in the streets, a lot of fear, but now we can see that people has just come out of their homes and come and celebrate in the streets of DC.
Yeah, no, if you were here, the energy is just ecstatic. There is so much joy that is happening right now. And we see a glimmer of hope, which I think is what Omar just mentioned. You have to be here kind of moment, I think. It's really powerful. And
The connection's a little choppy, folks, but what we can see, though, in the video is that there are a lot of people moving around Omar and Evelyn right now. This looks like a celebration from what you can hear from the cheers and the voices in the background. I think just hearing a little bit of what Omar and Evelyn said, it sounds like everyone is full of energy and joy as they celebrate President-elect Joe Biden's nomination to winning the office. Here with me also, I have a special guest, Daniel Beckman, a Peabody and Emmy Award-winning journalist, here with me today. And one question, Daniel, I wanted to ask you is, what does this mean for the progressive movement for Joe Biden winning today?
A lot of people are going to interpret this a lot of different ways, and so it's okay if people disagree with what I'm seeing in this. Right now, even if the runoff, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, succeeds, the Democrats lost 5 seats in the House, and we barely won this election. And on the one hand, I think people would kind of be like, well, maybe if we had Bernie, maybe we would have gotten more people. But in looking at the turnout that we had, it's kind of like both sides got everybody they probably possibly could have out to vote. And so this may be unpopular with progressive people. Fight for everything. Don't stop doing what you're doing, but realize that the country voted for something else this time. And we just have to be honest about that. And Biden almost didn't win. I mean, Trump had over 70 million votes. And I am not saying for a moment that you shouldn't try to always assert what you believe and try to get what you can, but also try to do it in a way where you can work with somebody else, pull them in if they disagree with you, talk to them about what they want and see what you can agree on, because this is an incredibly divided country right now. And a lot of the things that I think people wanted, like Medicare for all, is going to be very hard to accomplish with what was just elected, not just with the president, but with the whole body of government right now. And being realistic about that means that you might be able to get more done in the long term, because little wins do matter. And I know that people don't want to be patient about what happened, especially after the last 4 years. Things will get better because the executive orders will not be attacking people of color, people who are disempowered. They will change overnight. We do still have about 2 months worth of we don't know what between now and the inauguration. But, what I keep thinking everybody should celebrate today, and I've been saying all week, own the win. I mean, we worked with the campaign. This is a big deal for us. But I also want to, even if you think that the Trump people have treated you personally wrong, they hurt you personally over the last 4 years, see if you can handle the win in a way where you're trying to reach out to them, if it's at all possible. And I know that that might not be, because you've got all this pent-up emotion for good reason. But we have a really divided country right now, in a big way. And I think that we've been seeing, and I think, Marco, you you were talking about this in Philadelphia, that you can physically see the division right now out in the streets.
Yeah, and unfortunately, Daniel, that's exactly what you see. And a lot of the footage that's already been coming in across the country, specifically in Philadelphia, you can see in the Capitol there, it is a complete divide between the parties, from literally a physical divide. On the top of the steps, we see that there were the Democrats screaming of joy and celebration, while on the bottom of the steps, separated by at least 20 steps of police officers trying to keep the balance, we see Republicans yelling and screaming that the Democrats stole the election. I cannot tell you how literal and physical the divide of this country is represented right there. But again, though, when people going out and actually demonstrating, that is a small majority, and doesn't necessarily reflect all of the entire party's perspective as a whole, but it is still a perspective and still is a large group of people's position and opinion over the current ongoing race. And the race technically is still ongoing until we do see a concession speech made by President Donald Trump. I want to go back really quick to Omar and Evelyn. Omar and Evelyn, if you guys can hear me, could you guys show us and walk around a little bit of the downtown of the DC area so we can see the crowds and we can see what's going on?
Sure. Let's walk a little bit. We can see a few people. It's just celebrating. We can see flags. A lot of people with their dogs. People with instruments. You can just see how different cultures and pretty diverse group of people is coming to celebrate here. As I said, if you can just breathe joy and finally a breathe for a lot of these people that was concerned about the results, and just waiting for the results to come out. And finally today was the day, 4 days after the election.
Right, exactly. Where is the White House to where you're standing right now? Can you kind of aim the camera in that direction?
Yeah, so right in front of me, you can see the White House. There is a large amount of people. Right now, it's probably a little bit hard to see. There's also a fence with a lot of political signs on it. The city was preparing for right before the election for demonstrations, and it wasn't. They were really not sure what was coming up. So you can see in some of the buildings also a lot of tabloids, there has been people other than a small group clashings, but everything has been under control.
Omar, are you by chance able to get near some of those signs that you talked about? There's a fence with signs. Can we see that visually?
Sure. So I'm gonna try to go a little bit into the crowd, but as you can see, the internet is a little bit hard to get because of the
Yeah, the internet gets a little unstable when there's more people. Well, Omar, how about this? If you can hear me, maybe take some steps away from the crowd and see if you can talk to some people that are coming or either leaving the celebration. And if you could get into a location where the internet's a little bit more stable so we could talk to them through the further broadcast. I think that was a sure. Omar, can you actually go a little bit away from? Well, actually, it's kind of working right now. In a minute, though, after you get some of the coverage from the main celebration area, can you take some feet away, some like space away from the main crowd, so your internet kind of it's a little bit stronger. And can you interview? I think you went away again. Okay. Well, we'll. Okay, Omar, if you could move away from the crowd to where your internet is stable. Okay, yeah, folks. I think Omar's connection just went down. When he gets back up and when he gets an interview source for us, we'll bring him back as soon as we can. Until then, I'm going to bring back myself and Daniel, so we can talk a little bit about what's going to happen with the runoff election that's happening in Georgia.
Well, this is really important because I think that people are happy right now, and they should be. And I also want to outline that people, it's okay to be happy and celebrate. I think that's a really good thing to do. If things escalate, you have to practice what we call de-escalation. Somebody may say something to you or say that we didn't win or that you're stealing it or whatever. We did win, and it's not going back the other direction. They're not going to find votes. They're not going to find any of that stuff. But there are people in this country by the millions right now that believe that this election was stolen. So you have to practice what's called de-escalation because that doesn't do anybody any good. But feel free to celebrate, obviously. In terms of Georgia, this is one of those complicated things where if you don't win 50% of the vote there, they end up having a runoff. They actually want whoever ends up going to represent them to have a majority of the votes there. It's the way that they do things in Georgia. And with the election that happened this week, there were two of them. Both of their senators that they're sending there did not get 50% of the vote. This is going to be an uphill battle for Democrats. I just want everybody to know that. But what's promising is we know that Democrats are able to win with Kamala and Joe Biden. I mean, we're pretty close, but it's possible to get those votes out in Georgia. The other thing to think about there is more people voted for Biden than voted for Ossoff or Warnock, the two candidates that are running. And that means that people split the ticket. They're sending a message, we want Joe Biden, but we want a Republican in the Senate. We want to check on it. And if nothing changes, then we have a situation where if you want to get cabinet secretaries like Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren into the the Biden administration, you have to get Mitch McConnell to do it. And so people have been talking about it this week. If they end up losing these two races, or even one of those races, it's going to be really hard for Biden to get a lot of his cabinet picks through, and then also a lot of the laws that we want to get passed through. It'll still be complicated anyway because one Democrat defects and then it doesn't work. But there's a little bit of play here. Susan Collins, some other people on the Republican side could come to our side on some of these things, but they aren't going to come to our side on things that I think people have been fighting for the last 4 years to move the country forward, not just get it back to where it was. But if you want to pass some environmental regulations, I think we should be talking about a national law that gives a woman a right to choose, a national abortion law. We need to start talking about that because Roe versus Wade is a decision, but in many states throughout the country, access to abortion is already completely restricted, and people don't realize that. So we need to get a law in place so that people in those areas have access. So things like that will not happen if we can't get things passed in Georgia. And I feel really bad for the people in Georgia. If you thought you saw enough TV ads about this or whatever up until this point, you're going to be the focus of everything right now. And that is not a good thing right now. People want quiet. I mean, it is incredibly important. If for some reason we don't win both of those seats, the world will move on. But it is important in terms of realizing a lot of the dreams that people have.
I think, like what you said, this has been an exhausting week of events. It started Tuesday, and it feels like it's barely Wednesday, but all of a sudden it's now Saturday, and it feels like Tuesday has just lasted day and day and day. It feels like it never ended. We're tired, And I feel like a lot of people are just exhausted from this. But unfortunately, it's not going to end. And that's why we're here. And we're here to give you the news. Specifically looking at Georgia, exactly what Daniel, you were saying, because of the Senate elections, no one got over the 50% threshold, so they have to now go on to the runoff, which is on January 5th. That's when the runoffs will happen. And if the Democrats lose both of the spots, or even just one of the spots, then it will be a Republican majority held Senate. And if that happens, then Joe Biden, even though he got the nomination or, is the president-elect, will be a lame duck president. And the amount of work that he can do will be completely limited to whatever Mitch McConnell.
I don't consider him to be a lame duck president. That's
not. Oh, really? If he gets
there's two reasons for that. Number one, there's going to be midterm elections. So he'll be around for 4 years. And then in 2022, I guess, he could, if people don't like the way the government is working, they could vote some more Democrats in, and he could have 2 more years of significant progress. But I also think that something that's interesting about Joe and Kamala, and this was a liability to them with some members in our party, is that Joe is going to pass legislation with Republicans. And I think that if there's any message we can take from this, and again, I know this may not be popular with people, but you should change your tactics or think about your tactics to get what you want, considering the reality that we have. Over 70 million people voted for Donald Trump. They're still among us. They are still real. People watching this now may have voted for Donald Trump. We need to figure out how we can work together. I know that sounds cliche, but it's incredibly important, especially while we have this pandemic right now. What people haven't been paying attention to, we haven't been talking about it this week, is that when you have over 100,000 cases a day, in St. Louis, Missouri right now and places across the country, hospitals are beginning to get overwhelmed. And they can treat the pandemic. And I also say this to people who are going out there to celebrate today. There's still a pandemic out there, and it's brutal. And the more that we overload these hospitals, they can't treat it. So we have a lot of challenges as a country, and it's going to be incredibly difficult to work together. But that is the message, believe it or not, that I think people actually sent with Biden winning, but also in it being so close. And the fact that we really thought that there was no way that we were going to lose the Senate on the Democratic side. But it's so close. And it's going to be an uphill battle in Georgia, too. I'm as optimistic as anybody that we can pull this through. I'll give you one reason why you would want it to pull through. You have Stephen Breyer, who's a pretty old Supreme Court justice. You could end up with 7-2 on the Supreme Court if Mitch McConnell ends up getting a majority. So, it's incredibly important, and we have the possibility to try to win those seats over the next 70 days. I don't know, 60 days. I can't even really count anymore. It's less than that. And it is possible. But the way to do that in Georgia, it's not to fill and flood the state with people that are angry right now and righteous about everything that Donald Trump did to them. It's about trying to understand in every individual case there, in the ways, and this is what we did on the Biden campaign. Our platform gave people the ability to make videos, and what they saw was the Biden and Harris plan. And so if you can reach out to people and figure out what they want and try to convince them that Ossoff and Warnock are the ones that can do this and can help them, then we can win. If it's about like nana boo boo stuff and like really, spiking the football in the end zone, there's no chance, because Georgia is still, if you just look at what happened in those races, more people voted for their opponents than voted for the people that are in the runoff. There's work to do there.
Yeah, of course there is. I want to take a look really quick at what this actually means for America with Joe Biden and Kamala Harris winning this ticket. Specifically looking at Kamala Harris, there's been 48 vice presidents since the beginning of presidents and vice presidents in our country, and all of them have been white men. Kamala being the very first female black vice president is huge, not only just for the nation, but also for the women, the little girls, and people that look up to her as a role model moving forward in their life. I think it's really substantial to see someone that looks like you in this seat of power and actually getting to that position instead of just being told to, oh no, that's for the boys, or just to go sit down. This isn't for you. The men are talking. This is actually the first time that we've seen a woman in this position. And I think this is just huge. And I think that not only should women be proud, I think the whole country should be proud of this huge step forward that we've taken. What do you think about that, Daniel?
I also think it should be noted that she's the first Asian American. A lot of people forget that about Kamala, that has been elected to national office in this way. It's historic. It does mean a lot. I know that a lot of people out there think that, and I'm one of them, can we believe that it's 2020 and other major countries in the world have been doing this for generations, and now we just finally got, and it's just vice president, it's not president. But you got to be happy about it. You got to take the wins when you can. People were on that warm evening in November of 2008 when Obama was elected president, and everybody thought that racism was over. We were in a post-racist era. It ended up inflaming people and getting them more angry and creating the period that we're in right now. I don't think that Kamala is going to cause that in the same way. But I don't think it means that anything is over. I'm really happy about it. It's definitely will help generationally, and I hope that a woman becomes president someday. Obviously, we're all gunning for something like that because it's good to have inclusion. The more that people are included in our government and our society, it grows. And we all want that. We don't want people to feel like they're not included. So it is definitely a historic day. But I also feel like what the lessons we learned here is it's not over yet. It was very hard for her to get to that position. I honestly think that she had to take positions, we're hoping that she had to take some positions that maybe she didn't want to take in order to get there. Because in San Francisco, where I am right now, I lived here during that time, people of color were getting busted for things under her administration here that white people were not getting in trouble for. And so I also want everybody to know this, now that the votes are in and we've won, you have a right to keep these two honest. And I think the good news about them being in office right now is they'll honor that. I think that if you show up, you are constructive, you have plans where you want to get something done and you get the support behind it, they're not going to shut you down. And in fact, if anything, they need that in order to make the tough calls and to do the hard work. That's not easy. If we all stay home, it's not gonna. They're not going to be able to have the power to do the things that they need to do. So we need to show up. And the first year Obama was elected, I think people were like, "He's on that." We don't have to fight for health care, and we did. We didn't get a public option, which I think we're still fighting for right now. And some people wanted single payer then, which is Medicare for all. We could have potentially gotten it then if everybody was up to it. It was very close then, and the conservative crazies started showing up and saying that you're killing grandma, and I have Medicare, I don't want government run health insurance. So we're not done yet here, everybody. This is actually the beginning, and I know that kind of sucks, but I hope that people will stay engaged in the process. You can't elect Biden and Kamala and think it's all over. It isn't. I think they'll be the first to say that it's not.
Really greatly said, Daniel. Let's jump back to Omar right now. I think we got him back. Let's put him back on the screen. Omar, are you able to hear us? What's going on out there? It looks like we can see the crowded area again. It still looks like we're having a little bit of technical difficulties. I guess one of the last things I just wanted to ask, so I guess we'll try and fix Omar's connection for a bit. Daniel, I saw Cameron Sadeghi's comment in the chat, which is, what are Biden's biggest weaknesses? What do you think that would be?
I don't mean to, I'm going to get to this in a backward sort of way, because I don't think people recognize his strengths, because I do think that one obvious weakness is that they've talked about is that he has a stutter. his strengths are that he is so versed and so well known in the DC infrastructure. It's what people hold against him. People underestimate his ability to bring people together. I'm really excited about that because we've had divided government all the way back to the 90s. And that's just, in some cases we've had it all the way back to Vietnam, but for certain that we've had it all the way back to the 90s. And the problem with divided government is it means we're going to experience this right now. One government comes in and puts babies or whatever, separates kids from their families. The next one embraces immigration. So you have this whiplash effect. What Biden is going to do, which may not even be popular in some ways in the louder circles of our society, but in the people who go to work every day and want things to work out for their families part of society, he might do really well there, is get laws passed that'll stay. And we're talking about things like it's possible that Biden could do things like a new Civil Rights Act or Voting Rights Act. It is possible that he could do something with single payer because he knows how it works in Washington better than, frankly, Barack Obama did. And there are Republicans that respect and trust him. And it's not saying that they didn't respect and trust Obama, but like Biden likes the backslapping stuff that I think a lot of people think is gross. And that's to his advantage. And so I wanted to talk about his strengths first because I don't think people recognize that he actually might be a lot smarter and definitely more tactical than anybody appreciates. And that's a good thing. In terms of his weakness, he did win. He probably got over 50% of the votes. But like he's going to be dealing with the fact that there's 70 million people that may think that this election was stolen. And there's a guy out there that's not going to give it up, it sounds like. I mean, I think he will leave the building, but he'll still be, pushing that the entire time. We haven't had anything like this since the Civil War. If people want to look up Buchanan, I don't think Biden is a Buchanan. Buchanan was a horrible president. In some cases, you may think, if you look at it, he may be worse than Trump. Maybe not. We have to see how this plays out. But that is going to be his weakness. And I don't know if it's his personal weakness. I think he's got a temper. If you look at videos, one of the good things about him not campaigning as much is that he says things that people don't like who voted for him. That's going to happen a lot. It's going to be uncontrollable. You're going to see things that he says that he didn't even mean to say that are going to send things in crazy directions. It's a kind of version of Trump, much better, mind you, but that is definitely a weakness that I think people are going to have to watch out for because when you're president and talking all the time, you can't be reserved all the time. We're going to see the real Joe Biden. And we have to have, I hope, a little bit more leniency for it. I mean, let it kind of float out there a little bit, realize the alternative is what we just went through. But people will forget that in a few months, and people from our side are going to have problems with some of the things Joe is just going to say. And so that, I think, is a weakness. But I hope that his strengths make up for it, because here's the thing everybody needs to realize. This is the way it used to work, and I think it still can. If you go to one of these senators that's a Republican and you say, I'll give you a windmill in your state, or I'll give you something on the next law that you really need, or I've known you for 20 years, let's do this together. If it's 50-50, you can get it passed with Republicans, and then it stays. And that's why I'm friends with Republicans, and I'm going to be. And I've reached out to people today, and I've been like, 70 million people voted for your guy. Clearly they like something about him. And I hope some of that isn't the racist part, And I have to believe that some of it isn't, So if you have any friends like that, reach out to them. Let's try to figure out a way to do this together.
Daniel, I think one of the biggest things just to say is like in President-elect Biden's, his entire campaign, he pretty much talked about how he was the guy who could cross the aisle. He could go and work with both Republicans and Democrats. And I think now in the first term of his office, we'll see if he can actually do it, and we'll see the stuff he's able to work with, and how he's going to be able to get bills passed and make and unite the country, which needs to happen for everything to move forward, as well as to also focus on how to heal the country from the pandemic. And because if only half the country is listening to him, it won't heal. So the country needs to first unite, then we need to get through this pandemic, and then we move forward from there. I want to thank all of you so much for attending. Thank you so much for joining our broadcast. We're actually hopping over to another broadcast right now. So thank you again, Daniel Beckman, who's a Peabody and Emmy Award-winning journalist. We have Omar Rincon, who's a UC Berkeley student, as well as Evelyn Ramirez, a George Washington alum. This is HAPS, the network of now, and we hope you continue watching our special election broadcast. My name is Marco Torres, and thank you.